present some of their ideas. Do we have anybody who would like to come forward? I think this gentleman here in the back.
The first idea was the EPA should be protecting human health and it should be protecting the environment. It should not be protecting human health from natural environment. So it's kind of overstepping its authority here. The next idea was that we should have more single track. If we can move the staging areas to a safer area and have more single track, easily accessible without riding on long fire roads.
For the KCAC mine, two largest open pit strip mines in the northern hemisphere for asbestos, there's never been one reported case of asbestosis or mesotelioma from that area or within a 100-mile radius of the mine sites.
We all know this because we did the research on our own. It's there. You guys just want to look at the EPA and that's it. You don't want to look at anything else. It's ridiculous.
These are legitimate issues.
Yes, it is.
I understand,
yes,
and this is why we're here, and we're trying to make sure
what are you going to do about it?
we're going to address, we're going to develop a response with EPA's involvement, because as BLM, we are the land managers. We have a mission that is to sustain
we own the land.
public use.
That's public land.
I absolutely agree. As a federal agency, we are responsible. We're responsible for considering national, regional, and local interest. There's 300 million people in this country that own these public lands. So let's remember that these issues are legitimate, and we do acknowledge and I respect the fact that you're very concerned and obviously passionate and frustrated about this whole thing. But we have a process. This is how we're going to do it.
I am just curious, how come you only can look at the EPA?
They like that answer.
Why?
This is what I'm saying is that we're
as like that results.
Can I answer?
Yes.
BLM's mission is to manage the public land. So I can give you the line. EPA is the administrator of public health and safety.
Why are you only looking at the EPA report? Period. Why?
Why can't we have other reports?
I would like to, continue this, but I think that we've gone over it to the extent that we can come to agreement right now tonight.
Actually,
there's going to be a response.
He said the EPA is the administrator of public health and safety, so the BLM has to use them.
That doesn't mean that we can't consider other studies, other information brought forward. I'm acknowledging that.
You would find that there is no danger. So do it.
Yes, please.
What we're doing was OSHA. If there was a mine and they had employment records and labor records, and there were any findings against it, they would be registered with OSHA.
Okay, I'm not.
Or what? A federal agency.
Thank you, but I'm not foreign to these issues. I really am happy that we all have been able to talk about this tonight. I think this is the best way that we can all at least get this out in the air and have some kind of meaningful discussion and hopefully get you a response that you find adequate. I want to say that, again, I appreciate everyone's here passion and frustration regarding these issues, but I do want to thank you for coming out. I want to allow Steve Chappelle to make his closing statement, and I really...
As a single track should have far lower exposure risk, and somebody else suggested we should study that. That should be studied particularly because we know riding single track, there's very little dust and we ride at a slow rate. Not sure who had this idea, show the air sample historical data from racing events. Another idea is basically we've closed 31,000 acres and there's another 32,000 acres of BLM land that doesn't fall into the red zone. So and then there's private additional up to 75,000 acres total in the area, including the private property. So why not open areas like the Condon Peak area, provide alternate access into that? In fact, have the staging areas perhaps outside, have say half of all the trails outside of the red zone and the other half still inside the red zone. Right there, that eliminates 50% of the exposure, cuts the numbers in half right off the bat. So I thought that was an excellent idea somebody had. Human health studies, there's just been nothing, and there's probably plenty of opportunity to study actual cases. This comes up again and again. There's a lot of people been writing there, there's a lot of employees. Study some of them, figure out the true risk as opposed to the estimated risk. And finally, I think we don't have to necessarily fight the EPA risk levels and sampling procedures if we decide that we're going to measure the actual time exposure. They're saying 5 visits a year, 8 hours each, over 30 years. That may be just unrealistically high. Most people don't ride anywhere near that long. People move in and out of the area. I know I've ridden there 3 times in the past 3 years, and I probably won't be riding there 30 years from now unless I'm very lucky, still live here. But we can prorate the EPA's readings if we're able to figure out, do surveys or other measurements, which are fairly inexpensive studies to do. What's the actual exposure, and then scale the EPA results appropriately. In my case, if I rode for 10 years, 3 times a year, they're overestimating by a factor of 12 what my risk is going to be. And frankly, I'd be perfectly happy 3 times a year for 10 years.
Those are great examples. I think every one of them, was right on in terms of where we need to be looking at how to address all the questions and uncertainties and potential range of options that we have in Clear Creek. So thank you for that. If we have one more volunteer maybe to recap some of the issues or alternatives or concerns about the science being
was mentioned earlier is that the EPA, you guys are using the EPA as the only factor to determine that it's too risky to ride there. There's thousands of scientific surveys and evidence available that basically you could throw the EPA report in the trash. Is garbage. For every EPA report that you come out with that says it's too risky to ride at Clear Creek, you can find 1,000 reports that says that the EPA's findings are ridiculous. So why are you just looking at the EPA? Why can you not look at other scientific studies about different types of asbestos, about recreational exposure as opposed to occupational exposure? You're taking one survey and you're using that as like you got blinders on. You're not willing to look anywhere else. I'm just curious why.
You know, to add what he's saying there, they had that whole Atlas mine there, and they had all those employees. You can't go back to those records and find those employees and test any of those people?
No.
Why is that?
I mean, it's private. It's private property. It's not our property.
I believe there's
unless they gave it to us.
I'm not buying that. The government can't go in there and say, hey, we want to check out these employees and say...
Can I go to your doctor and get all your medical records?
Yeah,
Feel
go
free.
right ahead.
But I mean, without you, if you said no, could I?
I personally have been riding at Clear Creek for over 30 years, and I volunteer at my own expense
I'm with
to
this
get a
guy.
chest x-ray.
Okay.
Well, okay.
I believe you can probably get 100, 200, 300, whatever makes you feel happy. We'll all volunteer and pay for it on our own and give you the results.
There has never been any litigation by a lawyer, believe me, they've been digging